Well, good afternoon, guys. On this June 5th, I'm back on the slopes of Mount Olympus here to talk about the Pinyon-Juniper forest this time, or should I just say the juniper forest, because you can't really find pinyon pines here in the central Wastach. Neither the two-needle Pinus edulis or the single-leaf Pinus monophylla are found in the central Wastach, which is very odd because this is perfectly fine habitat for either of them, yet they just don't grow here at all. So I'm going to talk about that today and what we can actually find here in this Pinyon-Juniper without the pinyon. Now firstly, what we can definitely find here is the Utah juniper, Juniperus osteosperma. It's really a signature juniper of the inner mountain west, growing like all in the Colorado Plateau, the Great Basin, areas further north. Maybe really far east you might find some kind of Texas juniper, while way into California you'll find Juniperus californica. But for the most part, when people talk about pinyon juniper, this is a juniper species they are referring to. That's a pretty good one. It's quite hardy, can live for a long time potentially, and it seems to mostly inhabit the rather dry portions of the state. It seems to need less precipitation than Pinus edulis or Pinus monophylla need. So that's important to know. You'll typically, as you're going up in elevation in like the Colorado Plateau, find junipers before you find pinyon pines. But the precipitation really shouldn't be a problem here, because I have no doubt in my mind if you were to plant pinyon pines, they'd do just fine here. So it's a real mystery as to why they haven't survived all that well or haven't been able to distribute themselves to this region. Maybe there's an event a while ago that wiped them out from the area. I kind of highly doubt that. Even the last ice age I don't think would have done that to them. But even then, since you might expect to find just a couple of them growing around here, but you just don't. You only really get these junipers. In fact, just a little further west that way you can find the single leaf pinyon. So it's really strange that you just can't find any pinyon pines in the Wastach itself, or at least the central Wastach. In the southern Wastach you might be able to find a few, and maybe in the northern Wastach. But as I said before, right here we're just left the junipers, which is okay. It's very interesting, and I kind of like these quirks of biogeography. Now, I'm walking through a lot of cheatgrass right here. It's the Bromus tectorum. Definitely, I'd say the worst invasive species in the western United States. It's a really atrocious one, especially if you're trying to hike for it, because it's impossible to avoid getting your seeds all up in your socks. Like here, I'm already starting to have that happen. Although I'm being a little bit careful, so I'm minimizing it, thankfully, but still, it's no fun. And of course, you're also getting some of the Quercus gambelii around here, which can often be common in Pinyon-Juniper forests in the southern part of the state of Utah as well. I hope this isn't too shaky. It's very rocky ground here, and it's hard to focus on the ground and what I'm doing with my camera at the same time. Of course, not every species of ground cover around here is non-native. Right here, for instance, this clump of grass is Aristida purpurea, commonly known as purple three-awn, so named for its purple three-awns found on each of the seeds, which you can see very visibly right there. It's a very tough native species of grass that grows sort of like a bunch like this. I think most native grass species in the arid areas at least grow as bunch grasses, which is interesting because all the drought-adapted non-natives typically grow as annual grasses. Different strategies for different continents, I suppose, but either way, it very well competes against the non-native grasses. It seems to be the only native grass I can see around here. If I'm not looking too closely, I admit. There's a never clump. It's never clumps. They're easy to see here right now because they're still a little bit green, while the annual invasives have all turned brown and have basically wrapped up for the year. This, of course, is a perennial, as most bunch grasses are. In fact, I think all of them are, because really it takes several years of growth to form a proper clump of grass. We also got this plant here, a member of the sunflower family. This is Petradoria pumila. It's found very commonly in the western United States. It is a monotypic genus, so there is no other species in the genus Petradoria. Looks rather a lot like maybe a senecio when it blooms. I think, at least. It's been a while since I've seen them, but they produce nice yellow flowers, which are not quite ready to show off. But when they do, it'll be, of course, a very nice display. Around, I think, July, at least early July to late July is when you'll see them blooming around here. And of course, there's lots of Gutierrezia sarothrae growing all throughout here. It's just down there. We got another clump over there. These ones are rather young, it seems. They can get a lot larger and more dense with the dead stems of the past year's growth. It is a subshrub, so a lot of its growth will die back each year, but it still has a persistent woody portion that lasts for its lifetime. Like that is a stalk from the previous year. Very, very common plant in the western United States, one of the most common in fact. And of course, a very tough competitor against invasive species as well. That's interesting. I wonder if that's like a species of penstemon that hasn't opened up yet. Yeah, it has opposite leaves, so that's likely what it is, but I'm not totally sure. Likely the Penstemon platyphylla, which I was unable to correctly identify last time. Talk about this guy a lot. These are young Cirsium neomexicanums. So there's New Mexico thistles, but we certainly have a much wider distribution than that. Definitely the most common native thistle you'll find in this elevation zone. Here, the Petradoria pumila is definitely, I believe, a perennial herbaceous plant, but it seems like some persistent woody growth that's above ground, so maybe it's just barely a subshrub or just barely not a subshrub, depending on who you ask. Well, I like it all the same. So why are there no pinyon pines in the central Wastach? Well, the truth is, no one really knows. It's still a mystery, but perhaps the most likely explanation does have to do with precipitation. As you see, though I did say there's enough precipitation to support the population here, there is not that much precipitation in the summer, and most pinyon pines grow in areas further south, where there is a more adequate summer monsoon to deliver rainfall in the hottest months of the year. It's not really known if they need that to survive, but if they do, this might be a little too far north for them to survive very well. Though I still don't think that's really very convincing, because on mountain ranges west of there that are even drier, you can find some pinyon pines. So it doesn't seem to really be the most likely answer, but maybe perhaps around here they just can't compete with other plants that like getting more winter precipitation, which is the case here. And in the long run, they just get outcompeted by the Gambel Oak and the Juniper and everything else that grows here. Once again, that's purely speculation. It's not likely to be the real reason why that is. I looked at this bone I saw. Come from a deer or something. That's pretty cool. I'm gonna leave it so like mice can nibble on it or whatever. Oh, I just got some seeds in my socks. Oh no. Okay, well, I'm gonna keep filming for a second before I deal with that. Here's what I'm pretty sure is, in fact, Penstemon platyphylla. Look how pretty that is. Very purple flowers, but the ones I saw last time I was filming on Mount Olympus were a lot more pinkish looking. So I'm just gonna guess that's what it is. I'll try and make sure a little bit later, but penstemons are cool. They have one sterile stamen that sticks out, that's often fuzzy. You can actually see it right about there, I think, called a staminode. That's sort of their calling card. Member of the family Plantagenaceae. There's a lot of it wrapping up, going dormant. Cymopterus longipes here as well. Our stem really lengthens at the end of the year, at the end of our growing season. Like that used to be growing right along the ground, but it got pushed up somehow. Must be an adaptation to try and disperse your seeds a bit further. That'd be my guess at least. Well, let's move on. Well, it seems all the Wyethium plexicalis is now in full bloom. Maybe a little bit past full bloom actually, since they're starting to drop their petals, and I'm using that term colloquially. And the achenes are starting to develop. This is actually a great demonstration of how a capitulum is a collection of flowers. You can see all these little achenes are tipped by what looks like a tiny flower, because they are, and all the so-called petals here, the ray florets, are actually part of a their own little flower that together helps to form a capitulum, which is an inflorescence that looks like one big flower in the family Asteraceae. And look at that nice Quercus, another member of Asteraceae. I think this is Quercus acuminata, and that's the most common species of Quercus you find in these foothills around here. The other one it could have been is Quercus runcinata, but its capitulum looks more like that of a dandelion, to which it is related to. Quercus is in the same subfamily, the Chicoroideae, But those clearly don't look like dandelions, so that helps to tell them apart when they're actually in bloom. I'm going to start heading down now and talk more about what I find on the way. Oh, we almost missed that. Calochortus natalii, hope. A Sega lily. They don't bloom for very long, so I'm a little lucky to catch them here when I wasn't looking for them, but really great plant. Of course, the state flower of Utah. I see some mature Toxicoscordium around here, so I can find a specimen really quick. There we go. Toxicoscordium paniculatum. Seems like it's past bloom and developing its fruit now. A very toxic member, I believe, of Melanthiaceae. So yeah, don't forage it. It's called foothill death camas for a reason. Now right here, just on the side of the trail, we have what is probably the most common species of milkweed in these foothills. This is Asclepias asperula, commonly called the spider milkweed by some people, which is a name I don't really understand. Maybe it looks spidery to some people, like the leaves, but I sort of disagree. As the fall milkweeds though, the flowers are really cool looking. I wish more people planted these in their yard instead of just like typical Asclepias speciosa, which is thankfully native around here, but it's a bit overplanted in my opinion. It doesn't seem to be a very common plant in the wild here. What is interesting about this milkweed though is that the leaves are for the most part not opposite. They are often alternate or maybe just a little bit sub-opposite, so they're close together as a pair, but not exactly. I mean, this pair of leaves is of course opposite, but this guy's on his own, that's on his own. Those two are sort of sub-opposite. And they go up to the flowers. So it's a very interesting thing because almost all members of Postinaceae typically have opposite leaves, but these ones don't. And that includes most milkweeds, by the way. Yeah, really great plant to see here. I love them, but I was hoping I could see some monarch butterfly caterpillars, but I'm just not seeing them right now. And probably won't because they're kind of rare, and I haven't seen monarch butterflies in Utah ever, as far as in fact, I think the only monarch butterflies I've seen in my life have been either in a butterfly house or in Hawaii, actually, where they survive on the introduced Calotropis procera, which is like a very similar to milkweed, except it's like a tree and it lives in the old world. It's close enough, I guess, that monarch butterflies can also eat it and get the same cardiac glycosides or whatever that they absorb into their flesh to become unpalatable. And monarch butterflies, I mean, I'm sure you guys know this, their caterpillars have to eat milkweed. They can't, not just that they want to, they cannot eat anything else. Though planting milkweed isn't necessarily the best thing you can do to help benefit monarchs. They also need to eat stuff as adults, so planting wildflowers that they can feed on can also be a good idea for them. So yeah, and of course there's a whole issue with their southern range being what's most threatened. Not the lack of milkweed in the United States, but that is part of the problem, I think. It certainly doesn't help. Probably the last thing I'm going to film here today. You can also finally see that the Opuntia fragilis is in bloom. Don't cactus just make the most wonderful flowers? Also a little bug back there. I don't know if he's trying to eat the bees or what he does ecologically even. But he's very cool looking. He was sort of stalking into flowers earlier when I first passed up this way. And here's the smooth sumac, the Rus glabra, finally coming to bloom as well, or actually producing fruit, it seems. Yeah, we're past bloom, it looks like. Very cool. That could be old, actually, now to think about it. Yeah, that looks like to be a new bloom later in the year, even just a little bit later. As far as I'm aware, the only native normal-looking sumac to Utah. So I'm excluding Rus trilobata or aromatica, whatever you want to call it, when I say that. I might have one more clip I make, but for now, I'm going to say a tentative thanks for watching and see you next time.